This conference will now be recorded.
Hey everyone, this is Ozzy with ShulSource. Glad you could join me here today. Hoping that this run through on setting up electronic documents to be signed online specifically for the sale of CHAMETZ this year. Different times require different ways, and this seems to be in high demand this year. So I thought we would put this webinar together, and we're going to post it online later as well for those that couldn't make it live. So we're going to run through some samples and walk you through a process of getting this going through a specific tool and then embedding it on your website. There are many ways to accomplish this. This is my recommended way, and this is the way that I've been implementing with the synagogues that have asked me directly for help, or those that are already our clients. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we can set the agenda and get started. You should be seeing my monitor, which will include the ShulSource website. Feel free to check us out if you could use any other help at some point later in the future, or if you have any other questions. I'm certainly trying to be as helpful as I can during a crisis to help as many synagogues as possible get through this. So as far as the agenda for this webinar, we're going to go through a couple things. I would like to start by showing you some samples of completed projects or completed setups that I've done to give you kind of a vision of what this can look like. Then we're going to talk about the specific product that I'm recommending, which is Adobe Sign, specifically a business package of theirs. And I'll explain why when we get through that. How to prepare the Word document or PDF, and then finally, when it's all set, publishing it on your website or by email. So let's start with the samples. This should be on your screen. David, let me know in the chat, or unmute yourself if you're able to see.
All good, all good.
Okay, great, thanks. My good friend David Mitnick from right here in Baltimore. This is one synagogue, congregation Ohel Moshe, happens to be the place that I call my synagogue. And this is the page that we created. We ended up with a separate landing page. The instructions or information that the rabbi provides can be up top, or just to kind of set the stage. For those that are having trouble with online, our synagogue has chosen to also offer a way to do this by phone, but we're seeing since launching this that a majority of them are getting done online, which has been very helpful to the rabbi, and just makes it a little more reasonable as far as his time balancing everything else and getting these processed. And for those that are struggling with, and it's a real conversation, so let's just have it, because we're all either the rabbis themselves or synagogue administrators of some sort, the tough conversation about the tradition of giving the rabbi a tip or a gift at this time. It is, it's not required, but it is pretty common, and it, for many of the rabbis, is a significant amount of their Passover income that they do typically plan on. Everyone I've spoken to is, of course, completely understanding. A lot of the congregants are in difficult financial situations themselves, but we went ahead and addressed it here for our particular situation. I've seen this on many other sites, just to make suggestions of how it can be done in a paperless and not in-person fashion, and do it in a respectful and kind way, because everyone's got their own situation going on. And then finally, what we're here to really get into is this form itself. The form you can see is an electronic signature form. You can fill out the individual fields right here on this page, and you can submit it after a signature, and it's fully embedded into our site. So this is what one looks like. Got another one here from the West Side Shul on the west side in LA. And same concept, introduction text, some instructions or information about what's normally a slightly different process for many congregations involved, in-person, face-to-face with the rabbi and their form. I'll point out there's a lot of styles you can take with the form. Ours is very, information up top, details on the bottom. The one from West Side Shul is more of a kind of like a conversation, section by section. However you lay out your form, it's probably already in place. You probably print it every year, so you can easily adopt the existing structure to this new method of getting it set up. And can you zoom in? It's small. Absolutely. Thank you, David. How's that?
Good, good, good.
Okay, amazing. So, there's different ways to use the form. You don't necessarily have to reinvent the form. If the form was previously filled out by hand, then it should be spaced and set up pretty well. And I'll get into the details of how the setup of the form can help you in the the upload once you're finally trying to put this into the eSign software. So this is kind of what the end looks like the start with vision. And now let's start diving into the details. Step one, free trial. Everybody's going to love hearing that. And in fact, the specific tool that you need to use for this is a business level product, because it offers, as opposed to the single user one, it offers the ability to create documents that can just be shared and signed, which is our scenario. This isn't a contract that we want somebody to have to initiate and send to each and every individual that wants to fill it out. Instead, we want to create a static form or link where people can go to this form, fill it out, submit it, and complete it without anybody having to initiate their access to this contract. That is a product and a feature that's available only on the business side, which is why it's very important when you land on this page, which gives you the ability to start the free trial. And I'm posting this link in the chat now, and I'll follow up by email with it as well, that you toggle over to multiple users, click on the Sign Small Business and start a free trial. You register there, no credit card is required, and you'll also notice it's a 14-day trial, which gets you clear into face off this year. So this will take care of everything, and there'll be no cost. If you fall in love with the product, of course, that's the point of the trial. You can go ahead and look into the fees for paying for it. But for this year, this is actually a totally free solution. So go ahead and create that trial. Once that is done, what it looks like in real world is going to be this. You're going to be logged in, and we are going to be working with this particular feature, which is publish a web form. Let me just see how I turn on my pointer here. There you go. Spotlight. So we're talking about this, publish a web form. That's our goal, to utilize this function, which is only available on the business level. So having said that, and hopefully as you're watching this or as we're discussing this, if you have the ability, you're creating that trial, or you already did before the webinar. Now let's move on to one more strategic thing about this, and then the actual document setup. The way that this software works, the trial is obviously created using an email address as the username. That username is going to receive all the contracts. You can, once we get into the step of setting up the actual contract, the web form itself, you can have the contract send a copy to other people as well. So if you are setting this up as a synagogue administrator or board member for the rabbi, you can be the email address, but just keep in mind, you're going to get a copy of every single one of these contracts. And you can also set the rabbi to be an alternative recipient. He'll get it in real time as well, so that the rabbi will get a copy, and that is something that's available to you. But ideally, if you can create the contract in the email address of the person who is ultimately going to need to receive them, that's obviously the best. That way somebody else isn't having to wade through all those emails, but that's completely up to you. So once you're set up, we need to switch over to the next priority, which is the actual document itself. So the document that I have here is just a sample. It's got some of that Greeking language, just basic layout, as I showed you in the beginning. There's different ways to approach this. You can make it more of an interview, conversational, bullet point by bullet point, or you can have, this standard kind of format where the contract language is there. I, so-and-so, I'm appointing Rabbi so-and-so to be my agent in, managing the sale of my CHAMETZ this year, all that typical language. Again, easiest path to doing this is to adopt the current form that you already have and that we're printing in previous years. And then you get into the fields. Some things I want to point out that are important that you may have to modify in the design of your contract this year is the importance, of underlines. Underlines will help you with a shortcut later on once we start importing this document into the Adobe tool, because it will auto-detect and try to figure out where all the fields are. And there's a quick button that can populate a bunch of fields instead of you having to create every single field separately. So that is one thing to consider. The other thing is the importance of some fields that may not have been on your contract in previous years, cell phone and email address. Because this is being done remotely, you want to make sure that the information needed for the rabbi to circle back to anyone with any questions is readily available on the contract. And in the past, that might not have been necessary because a conversation was taking place and any of those questions would have been answered. So email and cell phone number, super important. All the typical address fields, offices, if they're being included, all that's great. And then from a design standpoint, the other thing I would point out is if you typically have tables or box format structure for some sections, when filled out in writing, this area right here, turn on my pointer again, This section here, where the details of where the food and the goods are located, is usually a grid with lines to make it easier for someone to fill that out by hand. That is not going to work out very well this year. So instead, I blank this out, and you make a big text box out of this, because when we get to the next step, you'll see that this will become a large multi-line text box, which won't necessarily line up with any grids. So that's important to get rid of that from a design standpoint. And finally, the only thing I would add is, again, when it's in paper, sometimes the layout isn't so sensitive, but just from a usability and flow purpose standpoint, I would put all the signature stuff at the bottom, because people are going to fill this out from top to bottom. That's the user experience. And if your signature box is usually up top, and somebody starts by signing and then fills out the details and has a conversation with the rabbi, that's going to throw off this process. When we get to the point where we're actually signing this document, you'll see that once a user clicks on the signature box, it's really supposed to be the last step. And that's what finalizes the document and sends it to the recipients, to the rabbi and anybody else getting copies. So, again, lines are important. Blanking out any areas that were usually grids or tables so that they can be one large text box, and putting the signature and identifying information at the very bottom for the final signature. That is all helpful. And then I would branch off here and say, based on what you're comfortable with and what your plans are for your workflow, you can make notes like this. We happen to have chosen to make this particular comment to those filling out the form, and I'll zoom in a little bit, which is that after the form is completed, expect a call or a text, some sort of notification that has been reviewed, and that's kind of like your checkpoint that it didn't get lost in a spam box, and that nothing, it didn't get confused or lost in a busy inbox. That is the end of this process, and anybody who doesn't receive that communication from the rabbi should follow up. Others may choose, and when we get into the actual tool itself from Adobe, others may choose to have the rabbi co-sign these documents, so that, like a normal contract using electronic signatures, the person signing it will initiate a signature that will send a notification to the other person in the document flow, and it will require them to sign. Some may be doing that as well. That's totally up to you. I want to give you general tips and general know-how to be able to use these tools, and I'll let you kind of customize your use and your flow all by yourself. Any questions about this before I move on to the next part, which is the actual prep in the Adobe tool?
Is membership or purchasing of other Adobe products required, or is this an independent standing platform?
This is its own platform. It will not require any credit card information, any previous purchases. Someone who may already be a Adobe user may have some trouble activating a trial. It may say that there's already an account, but I think some people have been successful if they have never activated a trial for this particular product. But the best thing to do is to use a fresh email address and to create a new account at the same time as activating that trial, so that you get the 14 days for free. But you do not have to sign up for or put any credit card information even when activating that trial. So after the 14 days, this account will just deactivate, and that'll be that.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so once this is done, you don't necessarily even have to save this document as a PDF. You can actually keep it as a Word document, or if you're using Mac, you can use whatever Mac's version of Word is. I forget. It's probably Words or something like that, or something similar. But either way, you can drag the file into the Adobe platform once that's done. So I'm going to slide this away, and we're going to continue with our use case right here. We're logged into our account, but we're going to create this, so this is what it's going to look like for you as well. So here we go. You click on Publish a Web Form, which is the tool that we're going to be utilizing. And the first step here, we're going to follow it in flow, is to name the form. So we're going to call it sample form. And this is important, okay? The signer, which is of course the web form recipient, okay? So that's the person who's going to be interacting with this form, is currently the only signer on this document by default. So that means once we finish this and we publish it and we have our links and our embed codes, the signer is the individual, the congregant, the member who is wishing to appoint the rabbi to sell their comments. This is where the countersigners and the CC stuff that I mentioned earlier comes into play. And now again, I'm going to try to use my pointer because I'm not sure if you're seeing my cursor there. So this area is important. because depending on whether you registered this with the rabbi's email address or with another person's email address, there's some important steps you need to take here. So if you are choosing to set up this account under an administrator or other person's account, and you're not the person that's going to be processing these sales, then you want to utilize the CC field. CC as opposed to countersigners means that this completed document will be copied to this other person. So it's rabbi@shul.com. Okay. And in this scenario, the way that I've got this set up, there is no second signature. There's no cosigner. The rabbi does not have to interact with this document at all. If you're going that route and you wish to have the rabbi complete these documents by co-signing, then you can add another recipient in the countersigners section. Okay, this will create some design changes for the document. I'm going to go with not doing this. I don't think it's the best way to go. I think it could create some hiccups and things could get lost. I find that most of the rabbis that I've had conversations about this process plan on printing out these forms and keeping a folder and then utilizing it for the communal sale that's going to take place. But if you decide to go down this route, this countersigners area is where the second person in the flow, the first person that's going to sign is the web person who's interacting with the form, and then the next person is going to be in line here. And in theory, you could add 2, 3, 4, 5 signers. Okay, but we're going to proceed with our concept that there's no cosigner, rather there's just a CC because the person who set up the account is the administrator, not the rabbi themselves. If the rabbi set it up, the CC is not even necessary. Then, of course, we're going to drag our sample document into this area right here. Sorry, drag, and when I say drag, no, we don't want to sign that. Sorry. Okay, apologize. Just trying to get that sample. Gotta save it. This is a great opportunity for Word to freeze. Amazing. Not responding. There's a commercial break. Sorry about that. Ooh, almost there, almost there. It's hiccuping, it's glitching, and it is almost back. We're back. Okay. Anybody still there? Somebody want to unmute and let me know that we still have contact?
Still here, still here. Didn't lose you.
Okay, amazing. Excellent. All right, now I am dragging my document over, and there it is. It drops into this file section, and we're good to go. Now we're going to hit next. The document's going to load up on the next screen, processing, and here we go. Excellent. Now this is the shortcut that I was talking about before. This blue box pops up and says, we've detected fields in this document. You know, can we help you shortcut things a little bit? The part of the ability for the form to do this is those lines that I was recommending earlier. It tips off the little AI bot that scans this document and helps it figure out that there are fields that need to be filled out. So, you know, that's where this pays off, creating those lines. You hit this button and it populates almost all of them. It did not find this box, but we can do that manually. And now as we go through this, some very important things to keep in mind with regard to how these fields are done. Firstly, I would recommend for every single field, except the actual signature line, to utilize only text boxes. On the right-hand side here, you can see that there's different types of fields that can be created and brought into this form. Signature fields, initials, signature blocks, things for the signer, things for the person filling it out, and then data fields. Text input is the way that I would go with everything besides the signature field, because again, it's a concern about the workflow. The email field is going to try to populate from what the person inputs when they finally do the signature at the bottom, and a user may get confused if that field is grayed out. So by automatic process, this particular field was already put in as a text input, but you should double check that all of them are text inputs. The next thing I would point out is using the required checkbox. And if anybody needs to, please, hang on, there's a question here. Oh, that question's been answered. Ask questions if I'm moving too fast. The required fields. This is a one-way document in our scenario. There's no cosigner, there's no review process, there's no back and forth, there's no corrections. So we want to make sure that we set up this document so that it is processed in the most efficient and accurate way possible. If you don't want to get any forms back that don't have names on them, then you must check off the required checkbox. If you want to make sure that all email addresses are returned, then you can set up required. And further, you could even create validation rules down here by selecting email for the type of data. The form is going to insist that this data have an email format. So something at something dot something, as opposed to somebody writing NA. If this is important to you for the efficiency of this process, that the rabbi be able to reach back out by email and you're requiring it, then these are things that you can do. Similar with cell phone, you're going to want to make that required. Now, using the detect button makes you check on every single one of these fields so that you click on them and you check the settings. So we're going to quickly go through all of them. This is still a text input. We absolutely need an address. This as well, still a text input, and we do need a full address. Now this section, office, may not be relevant to people, so we're not going to make it required, but we did want to make sure that it is a field type of text input, so that one's okay. Same with city, state, zip. Text input, not required, good to go. And further, on the odd scenario that somebody's actually away, hopefully they were away already before and not breaking travel restrictions and traveling to another community. But you know, these as well are optional because they don't fit every scenario. They just need to be text boxes, so we're going to be good with that. Now, when it comes to the larger areas that I had mentioned before where grids would not work and we needed to create a blank space, this is where you're creating a manual field. You're going to grab the text input by clicking in, dragging it over, placing it somewhere in the space. It's going to load up as just a small field. You can utilize this little stretch area to make it fill out the entire field, and then you've got that covered as well. Now, an important step here is that you want to go back in. Text input is what we had selected, but this sounds like a critical piece of information that should definitely be required. And you must check this multi-line area, multi-line data entry. This will turn this text box into exactly that, a multi-line data entry, and it will keep the font a size like 12 or something like that by default and let people enter lines and hit enter and, you know, go down and create a list. If you do not check this box, when people start typing into this finalized form, it is going to be in like size 10,000. It's going to just try to fit the text into one line in this entire area. So this is a very important box to check off, you know, to make sure the form works properly. Now, FYI, you can always come back and edit the fields themselves. What you can't edit once you start is the document in the background. So if you made a mistake on the form and you know you forgot a field, you're going to have to start over. But if you miss some of these steps and you don't create the validation properly or you don't create the requirements properly, when you're kicking the tires on this form and testing it, you could always come back and hit edit on this. This automatically detected as a signature field. That is correct. It's always required. The name is always required, and the date also auto-detected. That will self-populate from the fields themselves. We hit save on that, and it's telling me, yep, I didn't click into everything because I didn't click full name. So let's just check these, make the system happy by looking at them. Good to go. And now I believe I've gotten to everything, and we are good. Once you hit save on this, you get 2 pieces of information and the form itself.
Why was the date box not yellow?
The date box was not yellow because it auto-populates based on the current date. So it's not even a fill out. It's just snapping that based on the current date. So 2 pieces of critical information once you've finished this. Number 1 is going to be your copy web form URL. This is what you would want to use if you're emailing out a link through your mailing system and saying, click here to sign the document. If you do that, this is what it's going to look like. Creating an incognito mode tab, so I'm not logged into the product right now. This is any person with this link. Once they navigate to that link, they have literally just the document and they can fill it out. The reason why I'm pushing for the next step, which is the embed, is because many of the rabbis are choosing to have some sort of instructions and some sort of introduction to what's going on. So that's just something to keep in mind. You can execute this, of course, any way that you'd like. But that first link will take you straight to, on any mobile device, on any computer, on any browser, a signable document that's ready to rock and roll. And then the second piece here, which I'll demonstrate next, when building a actual page on your Shul ShulCloud site is going to be the embed code, and that's where you can create a page like we had seen at the beginning, which will display the actual document within a web page on your site. Any questions so far? Great, amazing. Okay, next, the final step here is going to be putting this into a ShulCloud site. So I'm going to continue using Ohel Moshe, my Shul, as a sample, and we're going to go ahead and jump into the form that we had created. And I'll show you, just kind of reverse engineer it and see how it was done. Number one, we went into our admin menu and we went into CMS pages and we created a new page. Simple is this: you just click on CMS pages from your admin menu, you'll end up at here, you'll be able to hit new page. And with that new page, you'll be able to make some important decisions about what it's called and what the URL is. Should be familiar with this if you've done any sort of setup on the admin site. The important recommendation here is that I would turn off all sidebars so that you can get a full width page. And so the document, the signable document, renders full width and people don't have to slide around within the document itself, and they can sign it without having to adjust the positioning of the document within the page. So I would recommend no sliders. You publish that page, and then you can, of course, make this design anything you want. But what we're seeing mostly in the ones that we've set up include some sort of introduction here at the top. You know, same as what we saw with the West Side Shul, some, you know, more detailed instructions about, you know, what's going on this year and why we're doing things, right, like Manishtana, why we're doing things a little different than we're used to, and then, of course, the signable form. So the initial box in the top of this new page that you're going to be creating will be for information about the sale and how to contact, any questions, things like that. And then the second box, and these are all, by the way, full width. You create these by clicking Add Section and by doing full width and adding those sections. And the second, possibly more tricky thing that folks might not be used to is embedding. So when you're in the section that you plan on putting the actual form in, this little button, I'm going to use my pointer again in case you can't see my cursor. Oh, nope, using my pointer turns off the cursor. So, okay, this little button right here in the top left corner of the menu, that is the embed option. When you click on this, you have the ability to copy and paste the information that is on the right-hand side here, the embed code, into this section of your new page. And that is what pushes that page into your website. Now, the last thing that I would point out is that there is a modification that I recommend people do so that they don't have to, oh, my Slack is jumping up here, so that they don't have to have the page load with the document not fully rendered in the page. And people would have to like slide down within the document that's within the page. It's just a design style thing. I left it both ways so I can show you how it's one way on West Side Shul and one way on Ohel Moshe in a moment. But the way to modify that is somewhere in this area. If you're comfortable making some modifications where it says minimum height, you want to change this from what it comes with, which is 500, to 1250. 1250 pixels will be the full size of the document and will be the difference between this document loading as either this, which is a full page document, saving. I don't know if you can see it. It's still it's a little gray, and my ShulCloud site is still saving that. There you go. So this is full size, and it doesn't have to be slid around, whereas the West Side Shul one that we had done, I have currently set up to not be that way, but I can adjust it now and show you the difference. So you see how people have to slide up and down in this by doing this little edit, getting into this code, and looking for the minimum width, which comes by default as 500 to 1250. We can modify the height of this document so that it renders as a single document and people don't have to slide around in it. And that is everything from top to bottom. I hope this wasn't too fast. This will be recorded and published later. And at this point, I am all ears for your questions. Any questions?
How does it work to fill it out on a smartphone?
So I've tested it. You know, like any contract, it will work. It is not necessarily. Sorry, my Slack keeps popping up here. I'm going to actually just turn off my screen share because somebody's obviously trying to reach me. And there you go. Excellent. So hopefully you're seeing just my pretty face. The mobile phone experience is fine. You know, I've done it. It takes a little bit of sliding around, and you got to tap into each one of the fields, but it's fully functional on iPhones, Androids, you know, tablets. It's perfect. Totally signable.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay. Well, hopefully this has been valuable for you. Like I said, the link to this meeting will go out online. I'll be re-emailing the recorded meeting. So if anybody needs any additional help or has any questions or missed a step, you can always re-review this video. And if there's anything I didn't cover or something unique that you think that I can help you with, I am happy to do that. We're living in interesting times and challenging times, and I'm just trying to do my part to help people out. So please don't be shy to reach out with some reasonable tweaks and questions. I'm happy to just help you get through this. Time is of the essence, and everybody's trying to get done what they need to get done to keep our important communal life cycle things going on here and moving ahead as safely and efficiently as possible. So I wish you all a wonderful Passover season, a Chag Sameach, and good health, happiness, and looking forward to next year and being back to normal. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much.